Chapter 5. The Law of Karma and the Law of Forgiveness. Man receives only what he gives. The game of life is a game of boomerangs. Man's thoughts, deeds, and words come back to him sooner or later with astonishing precision. This is the law of karma, which in Sanskrit means return. Whatsoever a man sows, that shall he also reap. For example, a friend told me this story about herself, which illustrates the law. She told me, "I make all my karma about my aunt. Everything I say to her, someone says to me. I am often irritable at home, and one day I said to my aunt, who was talking to me during dinner, 'Let's not talk anymore. I want to eat in peace.' The next day, I was eating with a woman with whom I wished to make a great impression. I was talking animatedly when she said, 'No more talk. I wish to eat in peace.' My friend is high in consciousness, so her karma returns much more quickly than to one on the mental plane. The more a man knows, the more responsible he is, and a person with knowledge of the spiritual law who does not practice suffers greatly accordingly. The fear of the Lord, law, is the beginning of wisdom. If we read the word Lord, law, it will make many passages in the Bible much clearer. Vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord, law. It is the law that takes vengeance, not God. God sees man perfect, created in his image and likeness, imagination, and gives him power and dominion. This is the perfect idea of man, recorded in the divine mind, awaiting man's recognition. For man can only be what he sees he is, and can only attain what he sees he attains. Nothing happens without an observer is an old saying. Man first sees his failure or his success, his joy or his sorrow, before it becomes visible from the scenes that have been set up in his own imagination. We have observed it in the mother who imagines the sickness of her child, or in the wife who sees the success of her husband. Jesus Christ said, "And you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free." Thus, we see that freedom from all unhappy conditions comes through knowledge, a knowledge of the spiritual law. Obedience precedes authority, and the law obeys man when he obeys the law. The law of electricity must be obeyed before it becomes man's servant. When ignorantly handled, it becomes man's mortal enemy. The same is true of the laws of the mind. For example, a woman with a strong personal will wished to own a house that belonged to an acquaintance and often imagined herself living in the house. Eventually, the man died and she moved into the house. Several years later, upon learning about spiritual law, she said to me, "Do you think I had something to do with that man's death?" I replied, "Yes, your desire was so strong that everything came your way, but you paid your karmic debt. Your husband, whom you loved devotedly, died soon after, and the house was a white elephant in your hands for years." The original owner, however, could not have been affected by her thoughts if she had been positive in truth, nor her husband, but both were under karmic law. The woman should have said, feeling the great desire for the house, "Infinite intelligence, give me the right house equally lovely as this, the house that is mine by divine right." The divine selection would have given perfect satisfaction and brought good to all. The divine pattern is the only safe pattern to work from. Desire is a tremendous force and must be directed in the right channels or chaos ensues. In demonstrating, the most important step is the first, asking rightly. Man must always demand only what is rightfully his by divine right. Returning to the illustration, if the woman had taken this attitude, "If this house which I desire is mine, I cannot lose it. If it is not, give me its equivalent." The man could have decided to move out harmoniously if it had been the divine selection for her, or would have been replaced by another house. Anything forced to manifest through personal will is always spoiled and has always bad success. Man is admonished, "My will be done, not yours." And the curious thing is that man always gets just what he desires when he gives up personal will, thus allowing infinite intelligence to work through him. Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord, law. For example, a woman came to me in great distress. Her daughter had decided to go on a very dangerous journey, and the mother was filled with fear. She said that she had used every argument, had pointed out to her the dangers she would encounter, and had forbidden her to go. But the daughter was becoming more and more rebellious and determined. I said to the mother, "You are imposing your personal will on your daughter, which you have no right to do, and your fear of the journey is only attracting it, for man attracts what he fears." And I added, "Let go and take your mental hands off. Put it in God's hands, and use this affirmation: I place this situation in the hands of infinite love and wisdom. If this trip is the divine plan, I bless it and no longer resist, but if it is not divinely planned, I give thanks that it now dissolves and dissipates." A day or two later, her daughter told her, "Mother, I have given up the trip," and the situation returned to its native nothingness. It is learning to be still, which seems so difficult for man. I will deal more fully with this law in the chapter on non-resistance. I will give another example of sowing and reaping, which occurred in the most curious way. A woman came to tell me that she had received a counterfeit $20 bill, which had been given her at the bank. She was very worried because, she said, the people at the bank will never recognize their mistake. I replied, "Let's analyze the situation and find out why she attracted it." She thought for a few moments and exclaimed, "I know. I sent a friend a lot of stage money just for a joke." So the law had sent her stage money, for she knows nothing about jokes. I said, "Now we will invoke the law of forgiveness, and we will neutralize the situation." Christianity is based on the law of forgiveness. Christ has redeemed us from the curse of the karmic law, and the Christ within every man is his Redeemer and his salvation from all inharmonious conditions. So I said, "Infinite Spirit, we invoke the law of forgiveness and give thanks that she is under grace and not under law, and cannot lose this $20, which is hers by divine right. Now," I said to her, "go back to the bank and tell them, without fear, that they have given it to you there by mistake." She obeyed, and to her surprise they apologized and gave her another bill, treating her very politely. So the knowledge of the law gives man the power to erase his mistakes. Man cannot force the external to be what it is not. If he desires riches, he must first be rich in conscience. For example, a woman came to me asking for treatment for prosperity. She was not much interested in the affairs of her home, and her house was in great disorder. I told her, "If you want to be rich, you must be tidy. All men of great wealth are orderly, and order is the first law of heaven." And I added, "You will never get rich with a burnt match in the pincushion." She had a good sense of humor, and immediately began to put her house in order. She rearranged the furniture, tidied the table drawers, cleaned the carpets, and soon made a big financial showing, a gift from a relative. The woman, for her part, tidied up and keeps herself in financial shape, always being attentive to externals and expecting prosperity, knowing that God is her supply. Many people are ignorant that gifts and things are investments, and that hoarding and saving invariably lead to loss. There are those who scatter and yet increase, and there are those who withhold more than is due but tend to poverty. For example, I knew a man who wanted to buy a fur coat. He and his wife went to several stores, but there were none that he wanted. He said they were all too cheap. Finally, he was shown one which the salesman said was valued at $1,000, but which the manager would sell him for $500 as it was late in the season. His financial possessions amounted to about $700. The reasoning mind would have said, "You can't afford to spend almost all you have on a coat." But he was very intuitive and never reasoned. He turned to his wife and said, "If I get this coat, I'll make a lot of money." So his wife consented weakly. A month later, he received a commission of $10,000. The coat made him feel very rich, connected him with success and prosperity. Without the coat, he would not have received the commission. It was an investment that paid him great dividends. If the man ignores these directions for spending or giving, the same amount of money will go an uninteresting or unhappy way. For example, a woman told me that, on Thanksgiving Day, she informed her family that they could not afford a Thanksgiving dinner. She had the money but decided to save it. A few days later, someone came into her room and pulled out of the dresser drawer the exact amount the dinner would have cost. The law always supports the man who spends fearlessly, wisely. For example, one of my students was shopping with her little nephew. The child was clamoring for a toy, which she told him she could not buy. She suddenly realized that she was looking for the lack and not recognizing God as her supply. So she bought the toy and, on her way home, picked up on the street the exact amount of money she had paid for it. Man's supply is inexhaustible and infallible when fully trusted, but faith or trust must precede demonstration. According to your faith be it unto you. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. For faith holds fast the vision, and adverse images dissolve and dissipate, and in due season we shall reap, if we faint not. Jesus Christ brought the good news, the gospel, that there was a higher law than the law of karma, and that this law transcends the law of karma. It is the law of grace or forgiveness. It is the law that frees man from the law of cause and effect, the law of consequences, under grace and not under law. We are told that on this plane man reaps where he has not sown. The gifts of God are simply poured out upon him. All that the kingdom offers is his. This continued state of bliss awaits the man who has outgrown the thought of the race or the world. In the thought of the world there is tribulation, but Jesus Christ said, "Be of good cheer, I have overcome the world." The thought of the world is that of sin, sickness, and death. He saw its utter unreality and said that sickness and pain will pass away, and death itself, the last enemy, will be overcome. We know now from a scientific point of view that death could be conquered by impressing upon the subconscious mind the conviction of eternal youth and everlasting life. The subconscious, being simply power without direction, carries out orders without question. Working under the direction of the superconscious, the Christ or God within man, the resurrection of the body would be achieved. Man would no longer shed his body at death, he would be transformed into the electric body, sung by Walt Whitman. For Christianity is founded on the forgiveness of sins and an empty tomb.